It is said that many high-level leaders like Steve Jobs and Barack Obama and Mark Zuckerberg, choose to wear the same thing every day. Have you heard this idea that some of them choose to wear the same thing every day? The idea, as I understand it, is that they are trying to take one small decision off the table so that they have more space, more brain space for bigger and more important decisions throughout their day. Each of us makes 35,000 decisions per day or so, I've read. And each decision takes some energy from our brains, from our hearts. Each decision takes something from us. We often find that the more decisions we make, the more tired we get. And by the end of the day, many of us face decision fatigue. In other words, we find that we're no longer making good decisions because all of our good decision-making energy was tapped out earlier in the day. Do any of you face that? Choosing what to make for dinner is like the most impossible decision, despite being the simplest decision. The work of making choices, these large choices and the little ones, is at the center of our life as human beings. It's one of the major reasons we are different from other animals. We do many things by instinct, but we also make conscious choices. It's one of the main things that sets us apart. And religious communities are one of those places in our culture that we go to when we're wrestling with our choices. Sometimes there's a specific important choice that we bring with us to ponder on Sunday mornings or in a small group ministry session or a session with one of our clergy people. Or sometimes we're just seeking a community of people with whom we can live deliberately, as Henry David Thoreau would have said. Sometimes we have made a choice for our own wellness or a choice to be more generous with the world, and we come to a religious community to help hold us accountable, help us stay true to the commitment we've already made. And sometimes we're simply seeking a place where our kids can develop a strong set of values with love at the center so that they can be prepared to make good choices throughout the rest of their lives. Today, we're talking about getting in touch with our deepest yes. Not our default yes, not the yes we feel like we should say but don't feel deep inside, but the yes that lives like a bell at our very center, which, when struck, resounds through our lives with a clarifying and joyful ring. That kind of yes. And so I want to share just 3 pieces of wisdom about our deepest yes that I have gleaned over the years. You may have heard me share some of these stories before, and I know that each of you has your own wisdom as well. So here's piece of wisdom number 1. As a parent of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, I am constantly in a state of fatigue. And I'm just beginning, literally writing this sermon made me realize that at least some of that fatigue is not just lack of sleep, but it's having to make not only my own 35,000 decisions per day, but many thousands of decisions on behalf of each of my children as well. It's my job as their guardian to keep my children safe and help them thrive, and also somehow we have to get out the door on a schedule too, and people need to be wearing shoes and socks. And it's their job to explore the world and try new things and test boundaries with absolutely no regard for time. Unsurprisingly, there are some days where it feels like thousands of my decisions are just me saying no to my children. I will say that this morning. There were hundreds of times I have said no already this morning, because we've all been up since 5. Thousands of times a day. No, thank you, honey. We don't put that in our mouths. Although those of you who were here at the Spirit Ed brunch this morning saw that my child was literally shoving a ball into my mouth over and over again, and I just went with it because I didn't want to have to say no one more time. No, thank you, sweetie. It's not safe to climb on that. Also, that happened in the Spirit Ed brunch for those of you who are parents this morning. That cord isn't for yanking around, pumpkin, but thank you. No, thank you. When my oldest kiddo was a baby, I learned about the idea of a yes space. How many of you are familiar with the idea of a yes space? Yeah, like some of the families are in here. It's an idea that has been in kind of parenting language since at least 2010. So maybe if you've had kids since 2010, you might know about it. You may not before, but you may be familiar with the concept anyway. A yes space is the idea of creating a 100% safe space for a young child. It originally arises from child therapist and infant specialist Magda Gerber, with the term coined by educator Janet Lansbury. This space must be so safe that even if the child's grown-up was locked out of the house for hours, an otherwise healthy child would still be physically safe. They might be very upset, they might have a full diaper, they might be hungry, but they would be physically safe. And this means that the yes space must be enclosed so that a child cannot leave it. At first blush, this idea seems kind of counterintuitive to a loving style of parenting. But the idea isn't to create a cage where a child can then be left alone, technically unhurt, for hours until a grown-up returns. The idea is that a yes space is central to your family life, that the grown-up hangs out in the yes space with the child, and that instead of needing to chase the child around and tell them no constantly in a house that is otherwise not fully safe, that inside the yes space, the grown-up gets to mostly say yes to the child. Though the space is enclosed and it restricts that free roaming of the house, it still opens up an enormous amount of freedom for the child to be able to play and explore joyfully alongside their grown-up without being constantly interrupted by a barrage of no. Yes spaces allow grown-ups to relax also, because they no longer have to be hyper-vigilant about safety concerns, and they can just enjoy watching their child learn and grow, and even take a moment to answer the door or use the bathroom without worry for the child's safety. So when my partner Kai and I transformed our living room into a yes space for our older kiddo, Nova, when he was a baby, we found that perhaps the biggest benefit was actually that our relationship with Nova was transformed also. Instead of having his parents constantly tell him no, and then him getting upset every time he was told no, as he was just trying to engage in the natural act of exploration, Nova got to have a relationship with his parents where we were mostly cheering him on. Instead of the exhaustion of continually stopping our happy little child from doing what comes naturally to him, and then caring for the frustration and for the sadness and anger that our automatic no caused, we were able to feel the joy of having an automatic yes. It just took a few changes to the structure of our primary family space to get us unstuck from that constant cycle of no. And it unlocked enormous joy and creativity and ease for all of us. So here is the first piece of wisdom. If your life and relationships are structured so that your soul is constantly being ground down by the amount of time you have to say no, look for the small changes that you can make open the way for more yeses in your life. Some of the ways that this happens in adult community is that a lot of alcoholics in recovery simply choose to not ever go to a bar or a place where people will be drinking, just taking that off the table. Or maybe if your buddies have been drinking buddies, sometimes it means building new community where drinking is not at the center of those relationships. I know a lot of people seek out this community as a kind of yes space for themselves, following a decision to turn over a new leaf or enter recovery of some kind. So if the shape of your life exhausts you from a constant no, I invite you to take a breath and see how you might restructure just one piece of that life to invite a more regular yes. Piece of wisdom number 2. When settled ministers like myself enter a new ministry, we usually have a ceremony that's called an installation, and it sounds like we're installing a dishwasher into a kitchen, but it's putting a human being into your pulpit. We had one here in 2016 when I first joined you all. Part of that ceremony is usually called a charge to a minister, which is where one minister publicly offers some usually tough advice to the minister who's being installed. And it's meant to guide their time with the congregation, and by being witnessed by the congregation, it's also sort of tough advice for the congregation to hear also. When my colleague Claire Feingold Thorin was being installed into her ministry at Fallen Community Church 11 years ago, she was a parent of young children herself, and she and the congregation were both wrestling with what that would mean for her to balance the demands of parenting with the demands of ministry, because the person who was there before had been retired, and there were not little kids in the picture for quite a long time before then. So one of my other colleagues, Reverend Parisa Parsa, charged her with these words, and these words resonate with me for any situation where two competing and important demands live on our hearts. So Reverend Parsa said, "While your heart may often be torn as you decide between being there for every soccer game and being there for the unforeseen but crucial demands of your job, know that whatever and whomever you have to disappoint will also be offered an opportunity for autonomy and for resilience and for living into their own power and purpose. Behind each disappointment," Reverend Parsa said, "behind each no is a greater yes. As someone who has to say no, you will also have the chance with each thing you turn away to get in touch in a new way with what you turn toward. Behind each disappointment, each no, is a greater yes. And not every time, but over time, let yourself continue to stay in touch with that deeper yes. Let it be a bright star to guide you," she said. Behind each no is a greater yes. When we say no to helping someone or something, they may be disappointed. We may be disappointed for needing to say no. But that no can offer two important gifts. For the person we are disappointing, we are offering an opportunity for autonomy and resilience and living into their own power and purpose. It's always good for me to remember that sometimes it is the act of not helping, not offering to fix the problem, not offering to rescue the person, that gives that person a chance to discover the internal resources that they need to solve their own problems, or a chance to build new relationships of support which can expand their network and hold them more closely. Not helping, sometimes, not always, can in fact be the most helpful thing we can do. And when we say no to someone, we free up space within ourselves, time and energy and breathing room to devote to the most important yeses in our lives. We are each limited beings. There's only so much that each one of us can do with our lifetime. And saying yes to everyone that asks something of us leaves us rudderless in an ocean of need. Keeping our focus on the great yeses of our lives enables us to live a life of purpose and direction and integrity. Piece of wisdom number 3. During my ministerial training, actually, John B., I didn't ask you this in advance. Would you be willing to just sing and play a few bars of our offertory when I give you a little nod? Not yet. Is that okay?
Will it be obvious?
It will be obvious.
Okay.
Okay. I could even sing it if you play. We'll figure it out. We've done this before, you and I.
All right.
Okay. All right, here's piece of wisdom number 3. I realized I have a place for John B. to sing in here, and I did not tell John B. that he was going to be singing in here. Okay. During my ministerial training, I was serving as a chaplain in the psychiatry unit of a Maryland hospital. Some of you have heard me tell this story before. And it was a lonely time in my own life. It was a few years after my own heartbreaking divorce, my devastation at my own father's death. And I had just moved to a new city for my training, but had no community and very few friends. I was deeply lonely. While the hospital staff members who were on the psychiatry unit were kind, it was still a grim place to be. Instead of visiting patients in their rooms like we did in other parts of the hospital, chaplains always met with psychiatry patients in what was called the day room. This is common practice in psychiatry units. In this hospital, the day room was stark. It had white walls and tiled floors, and about half of the room held a series of sterile round tables and gray plastic chairs. The other half of the room had 8 or so faded and torn aqua pleather seats. In one corner of the room sat a pile of battered old board games. The other side sat a small bookshelf, which was almost empty except for a couple of books on mental illness and maybe a Bible. There was a view, but there was no way to get outside. And the TV played an endless series of Law and Order episodes. There were no plants on the unit, there was no music, there was no art, and there was no privacy. And so one day I received a referral for a man that I'll call James. James had come to the hospital after finding himself about to walk in front of a bus. He was a quiet, unassuming man with a gentle manner. Every day he wore a pair of hospital-issued navy blue sweatpants and a white t-shirt. The first few times I visited with him, I don't think he smiled even once. You wouldn't know it if you met him, but James told me that he had been an alcoholic and an addict since he was 14 years old. Though he had spent long stretches of his life sober, like is true for many of us, for some reason he always seemed to relapse. James told me about how much he loved his children and how much he loved his girlfriend and his girlfriend's children. But when he had relapsed this time, his girlfriend told him that she had had enough. And he had just found out that his ex-wife had taken his 2 children back with her to the Dominican Republic. James didn't think he'd ever see any of them again. He had dropped out of school. No one in his family would take him in. And for the first time in his life, he found himself living on the street. Talking with James felt like calling down a deep well to someone who never wanted to climb out. To James, there was no reason to keep on living. There was no hope. And he felt that he had nothing to give to the world. He felt that the world had already taken everything from him. But several sessions in, he told me that he missed having God in his life. He had been trying to reconnect with God by reading the Bible, but it hadn't been working. And I'm a Unitarian Universalist, so I said, well, reading the Bible isn't the only way to feel the presence of the holy. Why not start with what you know? Where have you felt God's presence before? And James told me that he used to feel God's presence in a song. When he was getting divorced, he listened to that song on repeat, he said, dozens of times a day just to get through. If I can find the song on YouTube, I asked him, would you want to listen to it with me? And I'll admit, I had expected to hear that it was going to be a song of compassion. Maybe it was a song that promised that one day things would be okay again. Maybe it was going to be a good breakup song. And so I handed James one of my earphones. This was like 10 years ago. They weren't earbuds at that point. It was corded earphones. We each put an earphone in one of our ears, and I pressed play. Will your heart and soul
Will your heart and soul stay, yeah? Will your spirit still say, yeah? There is more that I require of thee. Will your spirit still say yes?
I was so wrong. It wasn't a song of pity, and it wasn't a song of despair, and it wasn't even a song of promise. It was a song that asked something of James. It was a song that called him to say yes to life. It told him that life required more of him than he had yet given. A song that asked him to commit wholeheartedly to life again. And all of the loneliness and the isolation that I was feeling at that time in my life welled up within me as we listened. And when the song ended, we both removed the earphones from our ears and we sat in silence for a minute. Finally, James said, "Thanks. I really needed to hear that." "Me too," I said. My friends, religious community is often a place we come to with the big choices and the little ones in our lives. And so whether you are here with a large decision that is weighing on your heart, or you're simply
Wow,
Wow.
that was exciting.
Well, that was my next point. So thanks, John B. Or whether you simply desire to join together with the band. Whether you simply want to cast your lot with a community that can support you in making the daily choices that arise from your deepest yes. Today, I invite you to listen to your mind, but also listen to your breath when you are thinking of what will come next for you, when you're wondering whether the answer is a yes or no. When you find that you are stuck in a constant stream of no's, look and see how your life might be reshaped just a little bit for more of a yes space. Remember that whoever you have to disappoint when you say no is also being offered a chance for resilience and for autonomy and for building out their support network. And you are being offered a chance to turn towards a deeper yes with every no. Remember that sometimes when we feel like we are at the bottom of a well and never want to climb out, what we need is to be asked to do more, to be reminded that there is more that life requires of us, to be asked to say yes. May it be so, friends. Amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.